Hello again, everyone. Alfred Cromwell here. I just came back from a walk and I'm wearing a hat because I'm wearing it very briefly. I just wanted to show because some of you asked me, somebody spotted me this past week in Washington, D.C., and they recognized me and they said, I didn't know you wore a hat. And well, I do wear a hat in public, of course, especially when it gets chilly. I don't wear a hat every day, but when I do, this is one of the ones that I wear, especially when it's windy or when it's the autumn-like weather. But anyway, you shouldn't be wearing hats indoors. It's it's a bit disrespectful. But anyway, I this is a follow-up video to I mentioned something. I published a video earlier today on the subject of education, on what does it mean to be educated. But I also mentioned that I was going to do a follow-up video on a New York Post article. And because in a recent dispatch, and I will place the link in the description to the op-ed that I'm referring to in the New York Post. I normally don't read such rubbish. The New York Post is one of the trash tabloids in our country, but well, actually, nowadays all the newspapers are trash. If we're going to be honest, but the New York Post is just has a wide circulation. But it really has endeavored once again to alarm the citizenry of this republic with the claim that America's public schools are producing generations incapable of performing the most elementary arithmetic. A claim, and I regret to say this, we will analyze it, but it is really less a sober analysis than a spectacular exhibition in hyperbolic folly. And if there's one thing that I lament of the past 30 to 40 years, it is that both the conservatives and the so-called liberals, they're not really liberals anymore, though, they are just as reactionary as anyone else. But uh, and by the way, just as a really side note, I'm really I spoke about Zoran Mamdani in a recent post, and I hate to say this, but a lot of people they criticize me for it. They say, "Oh, you're praising Mamdani," but the more I read about what Mamdani is saying, the more I find myself in agreement. At least for example, he recently called for people, I think, if I'm not mistaken, to boycott Starbucks. What could be wrong with that? I've been boycotting Starbucks ever since I can remember. It's a disgusting place. So at least he's saying some of the things that many of us, and I suspect many of you in the audience, believe or at least feel. That doesn't mean he's going to be a good mayor. If you honestly believe that in 2025, anywhere in this country, you're going to get a good mayor, then you're part of the problem. You're deluded if you have such high expectations of such a wretched class of the politicians. But at least Mamdani is saying something. I mean, he said things about Zionism that any decent person can agree with. And if you don't agree with what he said, then there's got to be something wrong with you. You've got something wrong in your head. But going back to this, what I was saying about conservatives and liberals, there has been we no longer have serious debates. We have a lot of exaggeration, sensationalism, tabloid like analysis, right? Long gone are the days of, when you had people, even people who I might have disagreed with, like the Hayek, for example. You no longer see that. If you ever read, or if you can see that on YouTube, if you look up the Montpelier, I think it was called the Montpelier Society or something like that, of libertarians and how they used to debate, they used to have very serious discussions. You had Hayek, you had just so many great thinkers in the past. Even William Buckley, who I disagree with because I don't like his proximity. True conservatives or true people who are truly aligned with tradition can never be on board with support for Israel. That's just the way it goes. And I know a lot of you don't like to hear that, but if you do, so if you are of that sort, then you are a neocon, and it's always been that way. People understood it to be. But I want to go back to because the article itself was talking about a subject. It really discusses a subject that is, as you all know, dear to my own vocation. That is rigor, because we're talking about mathematics. And I myself, as someone who defends pure mathematics, I am trained to admire the immutable laws of logic, the beauty of deduction, and the precision of argument. I get so excited when I'm talking about these things because I just received news, by the way. Side note, another surprise. I have another classroom, folks. Everything is falling into place. Praise God. Praise God. Really, God is so good. And those of you have asked me about my books. Yes, the pre order, I'm still working on the pre order procedure, which you will know about that very soon, how to order the, or those of you who want to place a pre order. It will be available as of January, the book on logic. Um, but you have to consider the beauty of deduction and the precision of argument. If you consider the assertion in the article, it says that what was it? 13. I had it printed out. 13%. 13% of students at the university at UC San Diego in 2023 could not solve arithmetic at first grade level, and that 1 in 8 faltered. They try to show them the equation 7 plus 2 equals blank plus 6. In other words, what plus 6 is the same as 7 plus 2. And but this has been going on for decades. And to pronounce a national calamity from these statistics is to commit a categorical error of reasoning. And so they commit an error of reasoning because it's very typical today, even amongst people who should know better, to mistake an anecdotal or limited data set for a universal principle, which is really a logical sin, we'll say. And the article itself fails the very test of deductive reasoning that I would presume the author seeks to champion, because it leaps without intermediary steps. It goes from a statistic to a conclusion of systemic collapse. And in mathematical terms, it is an argument without rigor. It's like a theorem without a proof. And as every mathematician knows, when you have a proposition that is unsupported by logical necessity, that's no proposition at all. It is really noise masquerading as knowledge, but that's the whole point of the op-ed. But the post narrative does not content itself with statistical hyperbole. Really, it escalates and then goes on to the vilification of those who labor at the frontiers of education. Now, there's a lot to be said about teachers. Believe me, I'm the first one. On this channel, I've criticized a lot of teachers. A lot of teachers shouldn't even be in a classroom. We've got a lot of undesirables in our schools because they're scraping the bottom of the barrel these days. Not all the time, but because it's such a poorly paid position these days, and you get no respect from anyone, then of course teachers are fewer and fewer people are interested in teaching. But according to this melodrama of this lady, who was born in Russia, by the way, she's Russian, the author, Russian Jew, I think she is, based on her surname. But the teachers' unions, according to her, are conspirators in a vast plot of negligence. And it says that obstructing standardized tests to conceal the intellectual failings of their members. And here you have another serious error. You have a categorical conflation of causation with correlation. You may deplore bureaucratic inefficiency, but you don't have to convert it into diabolical intent. You need to stop with the hysteria, some of you. And you can advocate for reform without demonizing those who toil, many cases often heroically, under really impossible conditions. Because as you will see, the article makes no mention of, have you looked at some of the parents recently, I always say. You can't just blame it on one direction. The entire society has collapsed. And the expectations of some parents are outrageous. I deal with parents all the time. And I push back on them. I don't put up with nonsense. And the parents know I've lost customers because of that, clients. Oh, you're not going to guarantee that my son or my daughter gets this and that? No, of course I'm not going to. I don't guarantee anything at all. I don't even guarantee anything for myself. Oh, you're not going to work hard so that why would I give you my money Why would I pay city tutoring if you're not going to do what I want? Well, you don't come to city tutoring so that we can do what you want. You come to city tutoring so that you can do what logic demands. And to do otherwise is to embrace rhetoric over reason. I don't need your money. You can keep it. I'm old enough to live without it. I'm living out of a suitcase right now. I don't need it. This is hysteria over analysis, what you have, and spectacle over truth. Now, before we dismiss, I'm not going to dismiss, of course not, the question entirely. We have to concede one undeniable point. There is indeed evidence that many students arrive. I've seen it myself all the time, and they arrive at institutions of higher learning less prepared than previous generations. That is fact, particularly in the domain of mathematics, but we could extend it to literature, reading. Very few young people today read a full, like, actual long text. If, I would venture to say, and please, you can correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I would like to know if I'm wrong. My impression of the young people when I say young people, by the way, I'm talking about anywhere between the ages of 17, 16, 17, all the way up to even the 30s, even the 30s. Many people are incapable of reading. For example, Thomas Hobbes, right? We had to read Thomas Hobbes in college, the entire thing, not snippets. We had to read Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations. I very much doubt, and I don't want to sound arrogant because I'm not, I could care less at this point, but you can correct me. I very much doubt that the typical 17, 18, 19, even 20 something year old college student today would be capable of not only reading such a long book, but also understanding it. Am I wrong? You answer me. Because the discipline of mathematics, unlike other subjects, really allows no compromise with imprecision. And you all know this. A misstep, even one little misstep in basic algebra, even or arithmetic, it's not just a minor error, it's a breakdown of a logical sequence, a fissure in the very edifice of reasoning. And so when colleges report that students are unable to solve elementary equations, we must really acknowledge the severity of the issue. And we do. And I know it, and I've often spoken out against it on this channel. But even here, the Post is exaggerating because its portrayal of this phenomenon as a national humiliation or the inevitable collapse of American education really neglects the subtleties of causation. Because you have to ask yourself, why are these students unprepared, not even underprepared, unprepared? And the causes are manifold. You have in this country specifically, but it affects even the European countries today, but not as bad as here in this country. We have many causes, inconsistent curricula across school districts. You have frequent curricular experimentation by unqualified, stupid politicians or bureaucrats. Many times, even unelected bureaucrats are doing it. And we have at times an overemphasis on student comfort at the expense of intellectual challenge. That's what the corporatization of schools does. So the root is not the failure of all teachers, nor of unions necessarily. I mean, those are all other external issues or education itself. It's really the erosion of rigor in instruction over the past several decades. Often, yes, under the banner of so-called progressive pedagogical theory, but conservatives are just as guilty. No Child Left Behind, for example, because they have prized engagement over mastery, self-esteem over competence, and process over proof. That is the main issue. And it's not a liberal or a conservative issue, it's an American problem. It is so to politicize it and say no because the liberal school is going to do worse or the I've been to many conservative schools in my area and they're just as bad in math. Believe me. Christian schools, for example. I don't want to name them obviously for legal reasons, but I can tell you that it's quite bad. So it's really undeniable that in arithmetic and algebra, students today they frequently encounter gaps that their predecessors might not have faced. We are observing. I have noticed there's a proliferation of techniques that privilege shortcuts over formal reasoning. You have calculators over mental math these days, intuition over deductive demonstration. I have spoken out consistently against the issue of intuition on this channel, and many there's a sort of breed going around, the sensitive types. Oh, how could you say that? How horrible! But it is the truth. The truth is not always kind, but the truth will set you free. And it's no wonder that a student may reach college. You're capable, maybe, uh, but you articulate mathematical reasoning poorly or inconsistently. But to leap from these observations to the assertion that the entire system is collapsing when it's already collapsed, or that teachers' unions are actively conspiring against logic, you're committing a fallacy there. Hasty, it's really a generalization that is very hasty. Sorry, I had to turn on the light because it's now it was the twilight of the evening. But as I was saying, the it's an utter disregard for the, like I said before, for the principles of mathematical logic, that the lack thereof that it is criticizing. And the specters that haunt the article have to do with, even though it's not mentioned, but it has to do with progressive educational theorists. And of course, it implicitly condemns those theories, right? You've got people like Horace Mann, John Dewey, and really their intellectual progeny. They're cast as villains in the post narrative. They are often accused of fostering mediocrity and undermining standards. And yet, in fairness, and I do not share John Dewey's political ideology, but he himself he didn't seek to erode knowledge, but really his goal was to cultivate the mind's faculties, curiosity, critical thinking, and engagement. Of course, he ignored other realities, but at least the intentions were noble. But the critique, the author's critique, it transforms those noble aims really into conspiratorial laziness. It's really as though the promotion of inquiry over memorization were some kind of a plot against arithmetic. And to misrepresent the work of theorists is to commit, again, the logical, the problematic. It's a problematic issue in logic because it's strawmanning history itself. And it also presumes a linearity in education. It's a belief that a child who falters in arithmetic in one grade is doomed forever. Well, if that were the case, nobody would be at city tutoring. I wouldn't exist myself because I was failing mathematics in seventh grade. If you read my biography, which you could find online, you can purchase it on Amazon. I think they have a PDF. I don't know if they have like a ebook. I don't control that part, but it's called Mathematician to Mathematician. But they fail to grasp the dynamics of human development because children do not progress as mechanical devices, and mastery does not occur at uniform intervals. And even in the best and most exemplary of systems, uh, variability abounds, and some learners may falter in their early years, and they only later on they blossom when they have proper instruction, guidance, and inspiration. You've got a lot of famous men in America who started out very poorly, but later on their talents were properly tapped. So to treat every statistical deviation as evidence of systemic collapse is really akin to condemning the heavens, because a single star twinkles less brightly than its companions. It is a rejection. Again, it falls into the trap of fantasy rather than addressing reality as it is. The fact is, there have always been dumb people. There have always been idiots, the village idiot, for example. There have always been evil people. And to fantasize past decades as somehow uh, more intellectual is a folly. Although the standards, I would argue, were far better. That I agree with. But then the piece further invades against the very concept of teacher autonomy. It really suggests that any deviation from rigid standardization constitutes malpractice. And so it also assumes, and I've said it many times before, that somehow standardized tests um, is the answer when it's not. The SAT tells me nothing as an instructor. I have had many students who do very well on the math section of the SAT, and they have no idea what math is about. They will not pass my class. And you know, if you're watching this video and you've had me as an instructor, you know you failed my class, some of you. Just because you had a 700 something on the math section of the SAT, you know nothing about mathematics. It doesn't measure anything that is worthwhile. But going back to the issue of autonomy for teachers and professors, when you exercise autonomy judiciously, that really is the engine of pedagogical creativity and intellectual growth. Without it, you have a factory line, which is what the people like this lady of the article want. You don't produce thinkers, you produce robots. And that's a concern far more worthy of alarm than some occasional arithmetic misstep. I've told you many times, I'd rather have the sloppy student and not the robot. I'd rather be with people who have been in prison before I am around certain suburban types, upper middle class types, whatever you want to call them. And what can we say of the remedial classes, which she cites them with evident horror? Is remedial instruction a scandal? I mean, that should be the very embodiment of the educational mission. It is to identify deficiency, to address it thoughtfully, and to elevate the learner to competence. And the existence of remedial courses is not necessarily evidence of failure. It is evidence of, perhaps in this case, early intervention. And really, it's a recognition that education is a continuous journey. It's not a terminal exam administered at birth. I have often recommended remedial classes. There should be some kind of filter. You say, okay, you need this prerequisite before you take Calculus 1. But what do the schools do? They just push people through. That's why you have, if you're a professor at the community college and even four-year college level, you know you've got students in your class who are utterly unqualified and they just push them through. The dean just wants them in there. Because it's all about money. It's not about education in any way. It's not about rigor. It's about money and marketing. We all know this. But let me assert with clarity, and really, I'm trying to be morally firm. This article in the New York Post is a prize puts rhetoric over reason, panic over logic, and it's a spectacle over sober analysis. It misconstrues pedagogy. It misrepresents historical theorists, and it substitutes fear for evidence. And you should never mistake a dramatic performance, or a written performance in this case, for a theorem. And education, proper education like math, it demands patience, precision, and insight. It's not reduced to statistics or grades. What does a grade mean anyway in 2025? She must be joking. I don't know about you all, but I'm not impressed when somebody tells me they're a straight A student. The first question I ask them is, where are you a straight A student? You're not a straight A student here at City Tutoring. It thrives. Proper education is not afraid of mediocrity necessarily, but it thrives in the cultivation of reasoning. in the pursuit of understanding, in the recognition, because human development is neither uniform nor easily measured. So we need to resist, as people of, as pure uh, mathematicians, and people who respect logic, we have to resist the siren call of panic. We need to uphold rigor, honor, logic, and we have to esteem the true mission of education, which is to cultivate minds that are capable of thought, of judgment, and the love of truth itself. I will link in the description the article, and you can come up with your own conclusions. But as usual, it was just a stupid article. Thank you all.